She posted the photo at 9:42 p.m. I know that because I was staring at it for a full 30 minutes, watching the comment count tick up like a heart monitor. Her. Brian. 2 wine glasses. That smug, lip-glossed half-smile she always pulls when she thinks she's untouchable. His hand resting just a little too comfortably on her chair back. Caption. With my real partner this week, wineglass red heart. I didn't comment. I didn't text her. I didn't even blink. I just screenshotted the post, saved it in 3 places, and forwarded it to the last person she ever expected to be involved. Because while she was out there performing her little act for the world, she forgot who she married. She forgot I never threatened twice. Funny thing is, the warning wasn't even loud. No yelling. No slammed doors. Just a quiet Sunday morning. Her suitcase half-zipped, the smell of bacon and burnt toast in the air. I was pouring her coffee when I said it, just like I always do. Cream, no sugar, just the way she pretends she likes it when clients are watching. If you post another photo with that guy, I said, I'm done. No drama. Just done. She didn't even look up from her laptop. It's just Brian. Relax. No, it wasn't. Not anymore. Look, I know most of you are probably listening right now without hitting that subscribe button, but if this story hits a nerve, if it keeps you holding your breath even for a second, subscribing helps the team keep these stories coming. It really does. Now back to the mess. She'd been doing this dance for months. Conferences. Business trips. Brian's just in my department. He's harmless. But harmless people don't text your wife after midnight with a champagne emoji and good luck tomorrow. Harmless people don't leave their cufflinks on your bathroom sink. Yes, I found them. No, I didn't say a word. Why? Because I don't play fair. I play long. You see, this wasn't just about infidelity. I could have stomached the lies, the passive-aggressive digs, the fact that she started buying 2 of everything like she was splitting a future I wasn't in. No, this was about something worse. Disrespect in public. The kind that doesn't whisper behind your back, but laughs in your face. The kind that makes other people start thinking they can, too. She knew exactly what she was doing. She posted it during a company dinner, dressed like she was selling perfume in a courtroom. All her coworkers commented heart emojis and slay queen, like they weren't watching a woman detonate her own marriage with a smirk. I didn't block her. I didn't rage. I just waited until the comments quieted down and the clock hit midnight. Then I picked up my phone and hit forward on the draft I'd written weeks ago. Subject line, conflict of interest, immediate review required. Brian, you see, was already on shaky legal ground. And me? I'm the quiet little husband she forgot to mention is the lead attorney for the plaintiff in the case that might end his career. I hadn't disclosed our connection because there hadn't been one. Until now. She'd made him part of her personal narrative. And that made him fair game. You'd think that's where the story ends. Like, boom, the moment she clicked post, it was all over. But no, this wasn't some Hollywood gotcha moment. This was a slow, spiraling collapse, like watching a glass of red wine topple in slow motion across a white rug. And I had been holding the edge of the table the whole time. She came home 4 days later like nothing happened. Waved from the Uber, suitcase rolling behind her, lips already moving about some keynote speaker and how the hotel forgot her vegan breakfast order. She had no idea. Not yet. But the shift started that night. First, the locks. Then, the envelope. Then the call from her boss. Oh, you'll love that one. But we'll get to it. Just know this. When a man warns you once, and then falls completely silent, you should have packed a second suitcase. The first comment under the photo read, power couple, with a fire emoji. Then a cascade of hearts, champagne bottles, the predictable, you guys look amazing nonsense from the same clique of office echo chambers that congratulated each other on every minor achievement like they were winning Nobel Prizes. She soaked it in, naturally. She always did. That photo was her dopamine fix for the week. The digital high of being seen, of flaunting a version of herself she thought was invincible. She never stopped to ask herself why Brian looked so stiff in the photo, why his smile was thinner than usual, why his arm didn't quite commit to the wraparound pose. She definitely didn't notice his eyes weren't on the camera. They were on someone just out of frame, probably the waiter, or maybe the woman 2 tables over who'd just recognized him from LinkedIn. Or worse, from the lawsuit. Because here's the truth she didn't know, and likely still doesn't fully grasp. Brian is being sued. Not for something cute like failing to meet quarterly objectives. No, he's under litigation for breach of fiduciary duty, contractual fraud, and violating a confidentiality clause that was so airtight it might as well have been written in blood. And the plaintiff? a mid-sized fintech company from Austin that lost 7 figures because Brian thought he was slick enough to advise a competitor under the table. And me? I'm the attorney handling that case. Oh yes, imagine that. Your wife parading her real partner online while he's neck-deep in legal quicksand, and her husband is the one holding the shovel. I'd kept my involvement quiet. There'd been no reason to disclose it. She never talked about Brian at home beyond surface-level updates. And I'm not the jealous type, but I am the observant one. And I knew from the first time she mentioned his name, with that little flick of her voice, like she was chewing on candy, he was going to matter later. Turns out, later came faster than either of them expected. I didn't send an angry text. I didn't blow up her inbox. I wrote one email. Subject line, conflict of interest, potential leverage. Sent to the managing partner at my firm. CC'd, senior counsel. Attached, 2 screenshots, one of the Instagram post, and one of her LinkedIn profile showing she and Brian worked for the same company, on the same client portfolio, during the same time the breach occurred. I included no commentary, just the facts. Let them speak louder than any threat. See, the problem with people like Brian, and, increasingly, people like her, is they forget the details. They chase ego and forget paper trails. They post selfies and forget NDAs. They think a like is just validation, not a potential exhibit in discovery. And her? She thought this was just some harmless, flirty snapshot. She didn't consider that it showed proximity, alignment, that it created the impression, however unproven, that she may have been feeding him inside information, or worse, softening client resistance through her connections. All speculative, of course, but speculation is dangerous in courtrooms and boardrooms alike. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to threaten her with divorce or post some passive-aggressive response. I just needed to introduce enough noise into the legal process to trigger scrutiny. And oh, it worked. Within 24 hours, Brian's inbox lit up with an internal escalation. Urgent. Review outside relationships. Potential ethics breach. The firm's general counsel was copied. His face reportedly went pale during their morning call. And she, still oblivious, was texting him selfies from the airport, telling him how they owned the internet this week. Owned, huh? More like leased, with no deposit and a clause they never read. But the best part? The real, slow-simmering beauty of it all? I wasn't done. That email wasn't the nuke. It was just the tap on the glass. The quiet reminder that some of us aren't here to fight. We're here to wait. Let her keep posting. Let him keep grinning in half-lit photos, holding wine glasses he can't afford anymore. I was just warming up, and they were about to learn how cold the law can get when it decides to look back. The meeting took place in a small conference room on the 23rd floor, frosted glass, filtered light, the kind of setting where polite voices dismantle empires. I walked in with a leather-bound file and a thermos of coffee I never unscrewed. The moment I laid the folder on the table, the room sharpened. 3 partners sat across from me. Lead counsel, litigation strategist, and a senior associate who probably hadn't blinked in 45 minutes. No one spoke at first. They knew this wasn't a routine update. I opened the folder. The first sheet, a printout of the Instagram post. Black and white. No color needed when the damage was already bleeding into legal relevance. The second, a snapshot of her company's org chart, with both her and Brian's roles circled. Same department, same vertical, tied to a client platform that had mysteriously pulled out of negotiations right before Brian's consulting detour surfaced. The third, a brief professional bio of my wife, emphasizing her involvement in the fintech accounts. Not written by me, mind you. That was taken straight from her own speaking engagement at last year's Digital Compliance Conference. She bragged about her cross-sector collaboration and high-trust rapport with legacy clients. Her words, not mine. Then I spoke. Her post may complicate Brian's defense. No one laughed. No one asked questions. They all knew what I was implying without saying the actual words. Impropriety, influence, implied collusion. You don't have to accuse people outright in these rooms. You just stack the facts like dominoes, slide the first one forward, and let the silence push it over. The litigation strategist, Monroe, leaned forward. Do you believe she had access to privileged info? I paused, then shrugged. She had pillow talk access. Monroe smiled, but there was nothing kind in it. That's admissible under perception of bias if opposing counsel can't disprove it. Exactly. You see, we didn't have to prove she did anything. The existence of the post, the caption, the timing, and their joint connection to a disputed account created an atmosphere. And in law, perception is half the war. You make a jury feel doubt, even for a second, and suddenly facts don't matter. Only narratives do. Monroe turned to the strategist. We've been waiting for a variable like this. An opening. Something emotional. I nodded. You have it now. They didn't ask why I'd waited this long. They didn't care that I was married to the woman in question. This was war by paperwork. Personal feelings don't make it into the minutes. They started talking next steps, how to subtly reference the photo in pretrial motions, how to build a line of questioning around shared company assets, how to connect the social optics to the ethical breaches Brian was already wading through. I listened. I watched them build the scaffolding of what would become a very public collapse, and I didn't stop them. I just passed them one final document. The date of the company retreat where Brian allegedly had access to documents he shouldn't have seen, and a photo from that same trip showing her badge clipped to his lanyard. Let's just say, I murmured, they were close. The room went still again. This is what she never understood. To her, this was a fling, a flirtation, a bit of digital performance to stoke jealousy and admiration. But Brian wasn't just some colleague with good hair and passive-aggressive charm. He was a man at the edge of a legal blade. And now, thanks to her photo op, she'd hand-delivered the handle to my team. The meeting ended with no hugs, no back pats, just quiet nods and closed folders. I left the room with one final warning. Let me know before you move. I want this clean. Because when you pull a trigger like this, you don't aim to wound. You aim to scatter. And by the time she stepped off the plane, smiling like she'd won something, the crosshairs had already locked in. And she didn't even know she'd become evidence. Brian saw the subject line just after lunch. Urgent disclosure required. It didn't come from inside the firm. No, this one came from an external risk consultancy contracted by their general counsel. A small firm known for forensic ethics audits and, ironically, public perception mitigation. They didn't send friendly reminders or annual surveys. When you heard from them, it meant a fire had already started, and you were either the spark or the fuel. He opened the email 3 times, reread the body twice, and then just stared at the screen like blinking might change the meaning. It didn't. The message was clear. Due to recent developments concerning your publicly visible relationship with an employee tied to active accounts under investigation, we are requesting a full disclosure of the nature and timeline of your personal interactions. This includes any off-site meetings, digital communications, and shared access to confidential systems during the last 12 months. Non-compliance will be escalated to HR and legal. Brian didn't breathe for a full 20 seconds. Then he did what most men like him do when they're smart enough to know they're in trouble, but dumb enough to think they can talk their way out of it. He panicked and texted her. What did you tell your husband? She didn't answer right away, of course. She was boarding a connecting flight, probably mid-latte, blissfully unaware that the caption she posted for attention had just cracked open a formal ethics investigation. By the time she replied, nothing. Relax. It was already too late. Because HR wasn't waiting. The photo had circulated internally, not through gossip, through a flagged alert. Their compliance bot, a lovely piece of AI they bragged about at last year's leadership summit, had picked up on the image through image scraping, facial recognition, and geotagging. It matched Brian's face, her profile, and their firm's account portfolio in under 6 minutes. That post wasn't just embarrassing. It was damning. And it didn't matter that she said, relax. Brian was already knee-deep in an open case with digital fingerprints all over it. His name was on Slack messages. Her initials were buried in metadata from shared presentations. None of it was proof of wrongdoing. Yet, but now that the spotlight had shifted, everything became evidence. Even the way they looked at each other in company photos would be up for dissection. And she was too arrogant to understand how bad it was. Still floating from the thrill of a dozen likes and a few coy DMs, still convinced that if she just told everyone it's not what it looks like, people would take her word over the timeline. But the noose wasn't waiting for an explanation. It was tightening from both ends. Brian's direct supervisor scheduled an emergency call. No agenda, just join now. He spent half the call muttering. It was nothing. We just had dinner. It's not like that. The supervisor didn't argue. He just said, then why are we getting a potential pre-litigation inquiry with your face on it? Meanwhile, at her firm, HR had already opened an internal review. Quietly, her assistant, who used to idolize her, had been asked to provide all calendar logs for the last 6 months. The team lead was pulled into a closed-door meeting, asked if any client-facing documents had been shared outside the comms protocol. Her name came up more than once, because the photo wasn't just unprofessional. It suggested intimacy, familiarity, maybe access. And in the corporate world, perception of collusion is often punished harder than actual misconduct, because it stains everyone. She texted Brian again later that night. They're not actually going to do anything, right? He didn't reply, not because he didn't want to, but because he was already on a call with his own legal defense advisor, someone he'd paid out of pocket, trying to figure out how many documents she might have seen while sitting beside him, smiling into a wine glass, thinking none of this would ever matter. But it did, because every moment, every word, every shared Google Doc or forwarded calendar invite, they were all being re-examined now. And the kicker? None of this came from an accusation. It started with a caption, a forward grenade, lobbed into a digital world that never forgets, with my real partner. Now, she was about to find out what happens when the court of public image turns into actual court. And Brian? He was already sinking and grabbing for anything to keep from going under. Even her. She got home Thursday evening, wheels of her carry-on echoing down the front walkway like a slow drum roll. Her makeup was smudged from a layover nap, her blouse creased, but she wore that same breezy, post-conference glow, like she'd just stepped off a stage and into another chapter of self-congratulation. Then the key didn't work. She jiggled the handle once, then again. Nothing. She stared at the door, her brow wrinkling, not out of panic, but mild inconvenience, like a vending machine had eaten her dollar. She knocked once, more out of pride than necessity. The door opened within seconds. He was standing there, casual shirt, sleeves rolled, holding a glass of water like nothing had changed. But everything had. Key's been updated, he said flatly. You'll be staying in the guest room. She let out a tight, humorless laugh, dragging her suitcase over the threshold. Wow, really? Is this your revenge arc? Locked doors and silent treatments. No revenge, he replied. Just boundaries. Something you said we should both be better at. She looked around. The house felt colder, cleaner, as if someone had already started deleting her. She walked down the hallway to the guest room. Bare walls, unfamiliar sheets. On the bed, a thick envelope with her name in typed letters. Neat. Professional. Ironic. She opened it with a scoff, assuming it was some petty statement. Inside, a copy of their prenuptial agreement, printed on firm legal paper, the kind that feels like it should be stamped in wax. Her signature on the bottom corner, clear as day. She remembered signing it years ago, the week before the wedding, after a long, wine-fueled, we trust each other conversation. But there was something else. A highlighted clause, yellow ink, precise box drawn around it. In the event of public actions resulting in damage to the shared financial estate, including but not limited to reputational harm, extramarital entanglements, or public association with litigated parties, this agreement is subject to immediate reassessment and asset protection amendments at the discretion of the unaffected party. Her smirk twitched, barely holding its shape. This wasn't in the original, she muttered, flipping to the last page. That's when her stomach dropped. The amendment date, August 14th of the previous year. A year ago, not last week, not during this conference. He'd been planning this long before the wine glass photo, long before Brian, long before she even started testing the limits. She stared at the date again, as if numbers might shift if she glared hard enough. He had updated the prenup, and she'd signed it, her own signature, right next to the notary's stamp. She hadn't read it, probably just skimmed the first few lines, assumed it was a housekeeping thing, something about refinancing or estate planning. He'd even called it a household security review when she asked. And she, distracted, overconfident, self-assured, had nodded, signed, and gone back to her podcast about high-performance leadership habits. Now, the trap had clicked shut. Is this legal? She snapped, walking back into the hallway with the papers in hand. He didn't look up from the book he was reading. It was notarized. You signed it. Yes. You tricked me, she hissed. No, he said without inflection. I prepared for you. She didn't reply. Couldn't. Because the worst part wasn't that he'd updated the prenup. It wasn't even that she'd signed away her position without blinking. The worst part was realizing just how early he'd stopped trusting her. A year ago, maybe earlier. How many dinners had they sat through while he was already drafting contingencies? How many weekend getaways had she treated like Instagram content while he quietly moved assets, rewrote clauses, and checked her ego against legal precedent? She returned to the guest room in silence. Inside the envelope was a second document, smaller, a summary of the amendment effects. It included bullet points. Shared liquid assets frozen pending evaluation. Real property reassignment review scheduled. Any financial liabilities incurred due to public entanglements, no longer shared. There was also a note, handwritten at the bottom. I didn't make you choose him, but I did make sure your choice wouldn't bankrupt me. She sat on the edge of the guest bed, numb, her carry-on still zipped, the house echoing in a way it never had before. Suddenly, the wine glass photo didn't feel clever, or sexy, or bold. It felt like evidence. And the caption? It felt like a confession, not just to the internet, but to her husband, the one who never raised his voice, the one she thought she could control, the one who was always 5 moves ahead. Friday morning, the phone buzzed just as she was finishing her second espresso and trying to convince herself that what happened the night before, being locked out of her own bedroom, the prenup, the amendment, the line about not bankrupting me, was just some ridiculous, calculated tantrum. He'd cool off. He always did. He was methodical, sure, but not cruel, right? She picked up the call without even checking the screen. Hey, I'm just about to. Don't talk. Just listen. It was her boss. Her real boss. Not the project lead or the team coordinator or whatever mid-level sycophant she'd been corralling for the past year. No, this was the person who could erase her career with one sentence. And they sounded pissed. Brian's attorney just contacted us. The voice snapped, ice crisp and fast. They're flagging a conflict of interest. Legal exposure. Timeline overlap. He's under investigation, and your name is now tied to all of it. She stood up. Fast. Coffee spilled onto her blouse, but she didn't even notice. Wait, what are you talking about? I haven't said anything. I haven't. You don't have to say anything. You posed for it. Silence. Her mind raced, darting between possibilities. She thought maybe Brian had panicked. Maybe he'd named her to deflect heat. But surely it wouldn't stick. She hadn't broken any laws, right? The boss didn't wait for her to respond. Did you make that man post that photo with you? It hit like a backhand. She froze, words dying in her throat. Because, her boss continued, voice rising. We just received notice that our firm may be dragged into a formal complaint for housing 2 individuals connected to an active federal-level commercial litigation. And if that photo becomes a key exhibit, we're not just looking at ethics reviews. We're looking at reputation damage. Serious, board-level optics problems. Clients will ask questions. She tried to respond. He posted it, but... Save it, her boss snapped. You've been benched. Effective immediately. Her legs buckled slightly, like she might sit down but couldn't find a chair. Benched? For how long? Indefinitely. There was no apology. No discussion. Just the clean, cold tone of someone distancing themselves from a mess before the smell stuck to their shoes. Do not come into the office, the voice added. HR will contact you. And if you even think about posting anything, personal or otherwise, related to this case, your badge won't be the only thing revoked. Click. She stood in the kitchen, still holding the phone to her ear even though the call had ended. The espresso was still seeping into the fabric of her blouse, warm then cold. For the first time, it began to dawn on her. This wasn't going away. This wasn't some marital spat. This wasn't about a post or a flirtation or some self-indulgent attention grab in the form of digital flirt theater. This was bleeding into her real life, into her career. And worse, it was doing so in the exact way her husband had tried to warn her it might. Quietly, without a single raised voice. She called Brian. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Still nothing. Her texts were left on read. The little gray bubble that used to animate quickly when she messaged him now sat dead and silent. He wasn't going to save her. He was already in survival mode. And she was quickly becoming a liability. She stared at her phone. At the last message her husband had sent her, 3 weeks ago. Just a grocery list. She hadn't realized until now how empty her phone had gotten. No more group texts from coworkers. No memes from her assistant. Her inbox was flooded, but not with plans. With warnings. Flags. Silence from people who usually replied in seconds. She walked to the guest bedroom. The envelope from last night was still on the nightstand. She opened it again, even though she knew every word now. Just to hold it. To remind herself that this wasn't a dream. And tucked behind the legal pages she hadn't noticed before was a small, handwritten card. Just 2 lines. You turned a moment into a spectacle. I turned a spectacle into a strategy. No signature. No flourish. Just brutal truth. She was losing everything, one phone call at a time. And no one, not Brian, not her boss, not her reflection in the mirror, was going to stop what came next. The email came in mid-afternoon. Subject line simple and bloodless. Client request. Representation adjustment. She opened it expecting a reassign. Maybe someone stepping back temporarily while HR sorted through the noise. But the name at the top stopped her cold. Greystone Financial, one of the firm's oldest, steadiest clients. The kind that doesn't flinch, doesn't complain, doesn't even call unless the building is burning. They'd been with her company for over a decade. She'd worked their account personally for the last 3 years. Dinners, handshakes, late-night calls across time zones. Even flew to Chicago once to deliver a pitch in a snowstorm. She'd built rapport, trust, loyalty, and now they wanted her off the account. Permanently. The message was brief, as if less language made the request easier to digest. Due to recent developments and optics surrounding ongoing litigation associated with Brian M. ________, and the emergence of public-facing content implying intimate association with one of our key consultants during an active legal dispute, Greystone is requesting an immediate and permanent change in client representation. We cannot risk reputational spillover. Reputational spillover. Like she was radioactive. Her first instinct was denial. She reached for her phone, started typing a response to her boss, then stopped. What would she say? That it was unfair? That the photo didn't prove anything? That the caption was a joke? That Brian hadn't even liked it publicly? None of that mattered anymore, because the fallout had jumped the walls. The legal blog post hit later that evening. One of those sharp, cynical pieces that starts slow and ends in a scalpel. Niche readership, but dangerously influential. It was titled, "When Intimacy Meets Litigation, The Ethics of Undisclosed Relationships in High-Stakes Cases." She was in the banner image. Not her name. Her face. The same wine glass photo. Cropped tighter this time. Zoomed in on her, and Brian smiling like a couple on vacation. Caption preserved at the bottom like a cigarette warning label. "With my real partner this week." The article shredded them. It didn't accuse directly, but that made it worse. It implied, repeatedly, asked leading questions in the court of public opinion. Can a firm protect client interests while housing private entanglements with opposing parties? What duty does HR have to screen for silent liabilities when photos go public? What happens when harmless becomes weaponized discovery? It named her firm, quoted sections of Brian's pending litigation, used her image to color everything. Not as a person, as a symbol. By 9 p.m., it had been reposted by 2 compliance newsletters and an accountancy ethics group with a combined audience in the tens of thousands. And in the comments section, a familiar name. One of her own former colleagues had written, "Used to work with her." Not surprised. She wanted to throw her phone. Instead, she refreshed it. Again and again. There it was, another email. Another client reassessing exposure. Not as sharp as Greystone, but colder in its vagueness. That chill in corporate speak when someone's already pulled the trigger, but they'll keep smiling until the paperwork clears. She opened her LinkedIn. Big mistake. One of her recent posts, a motivational quote about trust being the currency of leadership, was getting hit with sarcastic comments. Subtle, petty, but unmistakably targeted. A former intern wrote, "Gonna remember this next time I'm in a photo with a federal witness faced with tears of joy." She disabled comments. Too late. Because the post was already screen captured. It was on Reddit, Twitter, even Facebook, that digital graveyard, had found a way to resurrect her humiliation. Her phone buzzed again. "Brian, finally. They froze my account. My lawyer says your post was cited. What the hell did you tell them?" She stared at the message, then tossed the phone face down on the bed. She hadn't told them anything, but she showed them everything. That smile, that glass of wine, that smug little caption, meant to sting her husband, had instead become the accelerant on a legal dumpster fire. And the worst part? The person who set it ablaze never raised his voice. He didn't argue. He didn't post. He just pulled one thread and let the fabric of her reputation unravel in real time. Now, she wasn't just benched. She was being erased. Quietly, efficiently, by clients, by blogs, by whispers in meetings she would never be invited to again. And as the panic swelled in her chest, one thought finally settled. Heavy and permanent. This isn't going away. This is just part of what he planned. She waited until after midnight to make the call. Everyone else had gone quiet. Brian's replies had dried up. Her manager hadn't responded to her latest "Can we talk?" email, and HR had sent a generic calendar invite marked mandatory. That silence was suffocating. The kind where every minute feels like waiting for a bomb to go off, even though the detonation already happened. So she dialed the one person she still believed would pick up. Ava. They'd met in their freshman year, random dorm assignment. Bonded over cheap red wine and panic attacks before midterms. Ava was the one who stood beside her at the wedding, who knew about the Vegas incident, who once drove 6 hours to bail her out of a blackout argument with a former client. If anyone would give her the benefit of the doubt, it was Ava. She didn't even wait for a hello. "Oh my God, thank you for picking up," she said, relief flooding her voice. "Everything's insane. People are blowing this completely out of proportion. I just need someone who actually knows me." Ava's voice was low, not groggy, measured. "You lied to me." She froze. "What? You said it was nothing. You said you and Brian were just friends. That your husband was being paranoid." "We were just friends," she insisted. "That photo was a joke. It was sarcasm. I didn't think." "Exactly," Ava cut in. "You didn't think." Silence. "I defended you," Ava continued, her tone sharper now. "When the blog post came out, when Greystone pulled out, when the partners started poking around, I said it was nonsense, that it was all overblown. And now I'm being asked if I knew." She tried to steady her voice. "Knew what? That I went to dinner with a coworker? That we took a picture?" "No," Ava said, exhaling hard. "That you were sleeping with a man involved in an open case tied to your husband's firm. That you used your position to get him into that client meeting last quarter. That you, whether you meant to or not, opened the door for a compliance nightmare. That is not what happened." "Doesn't matter anymore," Ava said flatly. "Perception is reality now." She reached for something. An excuse, a joke, anything to turn the tide. "Come on, Ava. You know how people are. They love a scandal. This will blow over. I mean, seriously, you think I'd tank my career over a caption?" And then came the kill shot. "And your husband?" Ava said. "He warned you." The line hung there. "I was there, remember?" she went on. "That brunch, the Sunday before Denver? I saw the look on his face when you brushed him off. I saw how quiet he got. You laughed at him. You said, and I quote, 'You're not going to survive in the modern world if a photo hurts your ego.' And then you toasted Brian." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "I heard him say it. 'If you post another photo with that guy, I'm done.'" The silence between them was a vacuum. "You don't understand," she finally whispered. I was trying to feel something again. He was so distant. I just wanted to remind him I mattered." Ava sighed. "You wanted to remind him, and he reminded everyone else." Then, after a pause, "I can't be part of this. Ava, I have a mortgage, a career. I worked too hard for all of it to be buried in your fallout." Click. The call ended. No goodbye, just nothing. She stared at the screen like it might reverse itself, like Ava's name would appear again and say it was a joke. But no, that one person, the safety net, the late-night confidant, the ride or die, was gone. Not angry, just done. She was alone now, utterly, cleanly, surgically alone. Her coworkers? Avoiding her in hallways she hadn't even entered yet. HR? Treating her like a contagion wrapped in designer perfume. Brian? Mia? Probably lawyered up. And now Ava. Her final connection to the world that had once seemed so polished, so hers, had cut the rope and let her drift. She scrolled through her contacts, but every name looked foreign now. Every number, a risk. Every past conversation, a potential transcript. Her social world had fractured, and the cracks ran deeper than she thought possible. People weren't just stepping back, they were disinfecting her name from their resumes. And in the quiet, the bitter irony settled in. The only person who'd ever actually told her the truth was the man she humiliated online, with 4 words and a wine glass. And now, not even her best friend could stand next to her shadow. She arrived at the building just after 8 a.m., dressed in a navy sheath dress she once considered her power move uniform. Hair perfect, heels measured, face composed. The plan was simple: walk in, make eye contact, settle the chaos. On the narrative, she'd prepared a dozen versions of what she'd say. Clever, slightly contrite, just enough self-awareness to look human but not guilty. All she needed was 10 minutes in a room. But the badge didn't work. She waved it again. Nothing. The sensor blinked red. She glanced at the receptionist through the glass. The woman stared at her with a tight, bureaucratic expression, like someone watching a minor car accident unfold in slow motion. "I think my card's glitching," she said, pulling the door. The receptionist didn't move, didn't buzz her in. She picked up the phone. A minute later, 2 security guards approached. Not aggressive, but definitive. That silent choreography people use when they've done this before. "Ma'am, we'll need you to step to the side and wait," one said, gesturing toward the lobby bench. His tone was firm, emotionless, not disrespectful, but final. She felt the eyes. From the security desk, from the intern by the elevators, even from the guy mopping the tile who paused just a second too long before turning back to his bucket. She sat and waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The hum of the lobby felt louder than usual. Phones, footsteps, quiet conversations. None of it included her anymore. Finally, HR appeared. Not her usual liaison. This was someone new, VP level, in a gray suit with a leather folder tucked under her arm. No handshake. No pleasantries. Just the folder, handed directly into her lap. Effective immediately, the woman said. She opened the folder. Inside was a sealed envelope. On the front, printed in bold block letters. By direction of General Counsel. She peeled it open. Her eyes skipped straight to the key phrases, trained instinct from years of reading contracts. Termination of employment. Reputational risk to client relationships. Violation of internal ethics standards. Documented conflict of interest during ongoing litigation. And at the bottom, under the formal signature block, his name. General Counsel, Matthew K., her husband's full name. She blinked. No, that couldn't be right. Her brain refused to compute it. The man she had joked about being soft-spoken to colleagues. The one she'd once dismissed as not ambitious enough for her circle. The one she publicly humiliated without so much as a flinch from him. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't fought. He'd authored her removal. Is this a mistake? She asked, her voice cracking. There wasn't even a meeting. No formal review. This is already been signed off by executive leadership, the HR rep said. It's unanimous. But it's his name, she whispered. He's the firm's general counsel. The woman cut in, politely but firmly. And this came through channels. You'll be escorted to collect personal items. IT has already disabled access. Severance terms are enclosed. She looked back at the page. Cold, mechanical language. No space for negotiation. No room for saving face. And no way to spin it. She was out. Not on leave. Not under review. Gone. The security guard cleared his throat behind her, gently reminding her to stand. Her heels clicked against the tile louder than before as she followed them past reception. Past the same interns who used to ask for her advice. Past the hallway where her name used to be etched on the doorplate. Past the glass walls of the conference room where she'd once pitched seven-figure deals and accepted applause like confetti. Now, they didn't even look up. Her desk drawer had already been cleared into a banker's box. Her nameplate, gone. No farewell card. No awkward cake. Just silence and sanitized erasure. She clutched the envelope like it might still warm in her hand. Like the ink would smudge and say this was all just a bad dream. But it wasn't. She had weaponized a photo. He had weaponized protocol. And in the end, the man she had laughed at for being too passive had orchestrated her public collapse with the precision of a surgeon and the emotion of a filing cabinet. There was no scandal to explain away. No dramatic blowout. Just a memo. A signature. And a door that no longer opened for her. Because reputations can crumble in whispers. And hers had just been written out. She came home that evening slower than usual. Not because of traffic. Because of weight. That specific kind of heaviness that settles in your bones when you finally realize there's nowhere left to spin the story. Her phone was on silent, her heels in her hand. Her blouse had been worn too long. She moved through the front door like she was breaking into her own life. He was in the living room. Calm. Zipping up a suitcase. Not hurried. Not theatrical. Just finished. She stood there for a second too long, unsure whether to drop her purse or scream or laugh. Instead, she just said the only sentence that had survived the wreckage of her voice. We can fix this. He looked at her for the first time in what felt like days. Weeks. A gaze not filled with hatred or disappointment. Just clarity. The kind of look you give a building you once loved before it was condemned. He didn't argue. Didn't list grievances. He simply handed her a folder. Inside were finalized divorce documents. Clean. Pre-reviewed. Signed and notarized simple. Alongside them, property reassignment papers, banking separation protocols, and the official filings for asset division under the amended prenup clause she'd signed herself. On top of it all was a single sticky note, written in his familiar handwriting. You chose your real partner. I chose peace. She sat down. Hard. Like her legs gave up before her heart did. He rolled the suitcase toward the door. No second suitcase. No duffel bag of anger. Just one quiet, intentional departure. I didn't mean for any of this, she began, her throat catching. He paused, turned back, voice even. I know. A beat. Then the doorbell rang. She blinked. He nodded toward it without another word. She opened the door, still half in disbelief, half in denial. A courier stood there, expression bored, holding a thick envelope. Delivery for Ms. L. Requires signature. She signed with trembling fingers, took the envelope, and closed the door with her shoulder like the air had been sucked out of her hands. The return address was her firm's headquarters, but the sender wasn't HR. It was the board of directors. She opened it slowly, like it might explode. Inside, a formal demand notice. Due to the loss of client contracts tied directly to your conduct and the resulting reputational harm, the board is initiating proceedings for the recovery of previously issued performance bonuses. Total amount, $148,250. Deadline, 15 business days. There was no emotion in the letter, just numbers, dates, terms she used to explain to others like she was fluent in law and logic. Now, they read like a death sentence in Helvetica. She sank to the floor, the envelope in her lap, her body numb. Upstairs, she heard the soft creak of a zipper closing. Her marriage, dissolved without a word raised. Her career, amputated by a caption. Her savings, evaporating behind contract clauses she used to boast about writing. She looked up as he walked past her. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to, because he'd already said everything with silence, with signatures, with precision. He reached the door, opened it, then paused, just once. She looked at him, broken, barely breathing, reaching for a last thread. He didn't look back. He stepped outside and closed the door, not with a bang, with peace. And that was the final cruelty. She'd spent years craving the spotlight, crafting appearances, collecting applause from rooms filled with people who wouldn't remember her name after dessert. And the man she dismissed as just the quiet one. He didn't destroy her. He disappeared her, with nothing but paper.